Pokemon collecting has grown so much, though at the same time, so has card grading. In fact, Pokemon is now one of the most popular franchises to be sent to PSA, but does grading your cards actually future-proof their value? Now, before we get into that topic, I am gifting a subscriber this Zeraora V-Star from Crown Zenith. Now, I don't know if you won this card. If I do reply to your comment with this Terapagos emoji, then congratulations, this awesome Crown Zenith single is coming your way. Though, card grading is probably the biggest area where collectors have a hard time agreeing on. And to be fair, there's a lot of heated discussion about grading and there's a heap of drama, but there's one point we all need to kind of agree on, and that is that graded cards have an easier time selling, along with having the best multiplier of growth when it comes to appreciation. What I'm really trying to say, and pretty much make a video about, is that we have to be clear of the facts about card grading. And I want to go into some of those key aspects. The biggest area to discuss is that multiplier of graded cards, especially for PSA 10s, and how it works with multiplying and compounding the price of your card. When PSA 10s go up, they don't actually just go up a little bit. The premium multiplies, and that's what drives prices to the upper limits of the market. And that's why when you own PSA 10s, it can actually become super beneficial because of that multiplying effect. I mean, you can actually see how this compounding effect takes action when you look at some popular cards over the eras. I mean, check this out. All right, the first one that we have to talk about so we can get a good understanding of how these PSA 10 cards compound and how they work and why they're so important. Because what I really want to do in this video is actually present the facts, present the actual numbers so you can see it. Because when people complain about graded cards and this, card grading, you'll hear people, all this, people just get into such big debates about it. The reality is you got to just zoom out, have a clear view of why people like collecting graded cards. Before we even get into pricing data, the big reason why graded cards are such good purchases purely for the fact for card protection. That is such a good thing about graded cards. It is protected far beyond anything. So that's already a great way to buy graded cards. Another cool thing is when you sell on eBay, you don't even have to take photos of your slab. You can just upload the PSA listing and the PSA photo on their database. That's also a little bit of a unique benefit, right? But looking at this, okay, so this is the Gengar VMAX. We are looking, this is PSA's official website. So from here, you can actually see, it actually tracks all eBay recently last sold, and you can get a very good kind of overview of how all that traveled over the years. What I really like about using this is it tracks the data for years. So like you can even see vintage cards that were selling in like 2017. You can see what they sold on eBay in 2017 compared to today, which is really unique. So looking at the Gengar when it released, you can see it was selling for $375, $410. There you go, 345 US. Even when you're looking at 2023, around 3 years ago now, selling for around 365 US. There you go, $375. So it was always sitting at that range and was sitting like that for a while. In fact, it was selling for $375 in 2023, but even when it released, it was selling for exactly there. You can see in 2022, the year before, $375. It didn't have that much growth. But what happens when people start looking back, when the demand starts coming again, then it started rising. And you can see by mid-2024, started selling for 780 US. Then when that big hype wave happened and now the premium happened, that multiplier effect happens. And you can see all the way, it sold in September of 2025 for 2,325 US. So a massive price increase right there. And you can see the most recent sale price has dropped a little bit, but nothing too substantial in terms of how much growth it's had from early days, selling for $1,775. Now, even with something like that, when it goes from like $360 to close to $1,800, that's about a 4.9 times gain. I mean, when you have something like this Gengar VMAX, which has had growth of 70% year on year, that's elite level performance. That's a clear example of that PSA 10 compounding effect. It grows absurdly once the slab is in demand, and it's something that's really unique about them. Now also, while we're on the topic of graded cards, it's actually a good time to talk about today's sponsor, slabstop.net. So for my US viewers, this site is actually awesome. Slabstop.net is a slab pricing tracker that has a heap of features. One of the key areas is that it looks at GameStop slabs pricing and compares it to eBay recently sold listings to see whether it's a good deal or not. When buying slabs, it's a tricky situation because pricing can vary and it also depends what's on the market market at any given time. Though even if you have zero interest in buying from GameStop, it's actually still a super useful tool to get a better understanding of the whole graded market. For example, as you can see here, there's a small gem menu that pops up showing you how difficult a certain card is to achieve as a PSA 10. Right now, as of recording this video, SlabStop is completely free and built for the community. The link for SlabStop is in the video's description. A huge thanks to them for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back into it. Now another real good one to look at is the Magikarp illustration rare PSA 10, because we now, like, believe it or not, that card is approaching 3 years old. Time goes quick. We're a few months away and that card is, yeah, a 3-year-old card. You can see the Magikarp, the sold pricing in 2023, 590 US, 600 US, and a lot of sales here for 560, 610. So definitely has sold a lot, but you can see it held that kind of market at 600 US for a long time. Even in 2024, it was still selling for $600. So that was a long time where it held its price point. But what happened as soon as that rise started happening, as soon as people realized, hey, this card's very difficult to grade. Mind you, the Magikarp has around a 16 to around a 20% chance to get a PSA 10, anywhere between that. It is a super difficult card to come back as a PSA 10. And you know, when the market woke up to that and they saw that, you can see that compounding effect happen. Right now, the Magikarp, there you go. You can see in October sold for 2,225 USD. That's massive growth. That's huge. And that also, just by owning one PSA 10 copy, you can see how big the price increase happened. And in November, there was a sale for $1,820. That's the reason why it's PSA 10 slabs. And a lot of people say, if you're going to be investing in a collectible and you're thinking about growth, PSA 10s usually are the best decision because of that factor, and that's something to consider. Another one to look at, which is the iconic Moonbreon Umbreon VMAX. So this card pretty much started what I would say modern collecting. This card made modern collecting what it is today. It's known from every circle, whether people collect Pokemon or not, they know of Moonbreon. It made a lot of noise. In 2021, when Evolving Skies released, prices were around $560 for a PSA 10 card, which was very expensive back then, mind you. Right now, these days, nearly so many cards that get like 600 US pretty much. But back then, that was a big deal. Though even there, Moonbreon was selling for around 870 US in January of 2023. And it was holding around that price point under $1,000 pretty much all the way until early 2024, selling for $835. It never actually went to over $1,000 for a long time. So from 2021 all the way to 2024, it pretty much went from 600 US to $835. Not much growth. And a lot of cards like that right now that people think, hey, I've got PSA 10 copies, they haven't moved. A lot of people are thinking that. Well, guess what? Look at Moonbreon, same thing. But when those rises happen, when that compounding effect happens, when that multiplier happens for PSA 10s, it gets ridiculous. Look at this. Right there, when that started climbing, already by 2025, Moonbreon was selling for $3,000. So, you know, having it for $800 go to $3,000 is massive. It even had a high point selling for $3,950, close to $4,000 US for one copy of the PSA 10 card. That is a massive multiplying effect, and that is the key with graded cards, and that's why patience is so important. So when people talk about graded cards or they talk about PSA 10s, they sometimes don't see the full picture, because even if cards that you bought in 2023 or 2024 that haven't grown, well, guess what? Sometimes you got to give it more time, because when that happens, when people want it, when people realize, hey, this is something more desired than I thought, that really can start growing. Right now, the Moonbreon's most recent sale was $2,956. So it has dropped $1,000 off that high point, which is actually massive. But when you are looking at it from that big overview, like I said, it's very likely right now it's selling for $2,900, but I guarantee in 5, 6, 7 years, it could be even, 2 or even 3 times that price point. It just depends with how the market goes. But interestingly, when we look at vintage cards as well, some cards take years. And I'm not talking 5 years, I'm talking sometimes 20 years to really get their comeuppance. And the Suicune from Call of Legends is a perfect example of this. And like I said, with that PSA 10, what's so great about this is you can get that data from 2017. Right here, the Call of Legends Suicune selling for 237 US. Again, in 2018, 350 US. 2019, $209. And even late 2019, $186. So this card moved nowhere. But guess what? People are now looking back at Call of Legends. People think Call of Legends is one of the best sets ever made. If you did watch my video of the 10 greatest Pokemon sets of all time, guess what's in the #1 spot? Hey, spoiler, Call of Legends. And that's what happened. People realized, hey, this set is great, but it took some time. It wasn't available. People weren't seeing that early days. People only started seeing that in retrospect. And now let's look at the price of this. Right there, by early 2020, $1,237. Then in 2022, sold for $1,944. Did drop a little bit back to $1,300, but then check that out. Had a sale in September of last year for $7,100. And right now, the most recent sale was $5,600. Yes, it's a big drop from $7,000, but in terms of the multiplying effect, if you bought this for $180 or $200 US, and you can sell it for $5,600, that is huge growth. And that is that key factor about PSA 10 cards, what they do and how they work. Same with Regirock, the Gold Star as well. This one, similar kind of movements to that Call of Legends Suicune. It just took such a long time to get there. All throughout 2017, selling for $325, $299. Even in 2019, another sale for $366. But of course, when that first boom happened, went up to $2,000 US. And right now, most recent sale price sold in August 10th of 2025 for $7,900. Massive price spike, but it just took that time. And that a lot of the modern cards today as well, people might like override them, modern's overprinted. Sure, you can have that kind of conversation, but if the hobby keeps growing, there's going to be more players in the game and less of those cards available, so it's something to consider. Now, this one is a bit more of a rare card, but it's just interesting to see the Latias Gold Star as well. And only 4 sales in the last year. There's pretty much only been 4 sales, but $1,200 in 2017. In 2020, $6,600. Another one in July of 2020 for $15,000. And there you go, in late 2020 for $20,100. It'd be very interesting to see what this card would get today. I imagine it would even exceed that price point, given that this was in the first boom. Right now, only 4 sales in history, this card would be selling for an enormous amount. Unless it has sold recently and I'm unaware, hasn't updated in the back end. If that has happened, let me know. I'm not sure. I have a feeling that I did see it, maybe a sale of this. I'm not sure about that. But there you go. Massive kind of price growth and that compounding effect as well from 2017, from 1,200 all the way to 20,000. If it sold in 2026, it's been 6 years since the last sale. Hey, could have even gone, maybe 50, 60, 70,000. You never know with these cards. And everyone's favorite Bubble Mew, the Mew from Paldean Fates. Another really interesting one to see. Pretty much all throughout 2024, there you go, PSA 10 for $255. Imagine buying that. And you can see that held, even mid-2024, $220. Even by late 2024, you were paying $272 for a PSA 10 copy of this card. Definitely, for today, even the raw copy is way more expensive than that. So you could have bought PSA 10s for that price, but then again, when that multiplier happened and that compounding effect, there in 2025 was selling for $2,000 a slab. Right now, most recent sale price, $1,525. A little bit of a drop, but it is likely as the years go on, it can continue rising. And that is the power of PSA 10 Pokemon cards because of the way they kind of work in the market. And when they start rising, they rise a lot. Of course, they can drop as well. It's not just always endless gains. It doesn't mean that every card's going to just gain. But it is important to know why people really do like graded cards. And when you do have that PSA 10 copy, you're kind of having the maximum point of where that card can go. That is the highest point it can ever kind of reach in terms of quality. It's a PSA 10, unless it's a BGS Black Label, but there's so many cards that don't even exist in a BGS Black Label. At least with PSA 10, it is likely you can get your hands on a lot of modern cards as PSA 10s if you really wanted it, whereas BGS Black Label, that's pretty much out of the question for most people. But in terms of this, it's something that you can actually attain and add to your collection. A lot of these cards, besides like the Gold Stars, unless you're a millionaire. Hey, let me know. Let me know if you are. Nonetheless, that is a really important factor about PSA 10 copies. But graded cards are an interesting part of collectibles, and in all honesty, they're a fundamental. Though a common mistake that newcomers make is thinking all grading companies are the same, and you want to avoid that. And the reason is explained in detail in this video on screen right here. On this video that's appearing on screen, you'll actually see me explaining why avoiding that mistake of thinking all grading companies are equal is very important. I appreciate you watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.